Well, hello. Welcome once again to another edition of Pray on This. I'm your host, John Pray, and I just thought that today I would do a end of week in review, shall we say. Um, I have just been observing some of the weird and wacky things going on, not just in Canada, but in the United States of the past week, and I thought that I would just share them with you. I'm going to start off in Alberta. Uh, for many of you who don't know, the Alberta provincial election happens on May 29th. And this actually could be one of the most important elections in Canada because on the one side we have Rachel Notley. She is the leader of the New Democratic Party. And on the other side, we have Danielle Smith. She is the leader of the United Conservative Party. For those of you who don't know, the Liberal Party as a provincial party doesn't exist in Alberta. It's the biggest joke you ever want to talk about. Now, when I talk about the insanity of it, just a little background. Rachel Notley was Premier of the province after 45 years of Conservative rule in Alberta from 2015 to 2019. And during her time, she ran massive deficits. The economy in Alberta constricted immensely. 25,000 people moved out of the province. They had a massive debt, massive layoffs. The energy sector of Alberta was hurt immensely, and she wants back in power. She also claims that they did great things for healthcare, and yet healthcare suffered more in Alberta in the NDP's 4 years than it ever did under the Conservatives. Then we have Danielle Smith, who, as conservatives in Canada goes, she's pretty conservative. Um, I would consider her to be more conservative than Pierre Poilievre, but it's Alberta. And Alberta is the Texas of Canada, as people like to say. What I find funny and amazing is that Danielle Smith, who the CBC has already tried to paint as someone who's using political interference in court cases by talking with Crown attorneys about fines and everything else levied during the pandemic, that she's violating her office. CBC has already had to retract two of these stories. There is possibility of litigation for outright lying, but they're still moving forward. It's a proven fact that they have fabricated evidence against the premier, and there's now a public inquiry to which Danielle Smith says, let's go, bring it on, because I know I will be exonerated. But she's also said, for the purpose of keeping press conferences civil, from now on, she will take one question and one quick follow-up if it's on the same subject per reporter. Rachel Notley has come out and said, oh, she's trying to run away from the press. This is not what a politician does. I will always run the most open government possible. It's kind of funny. Less than 5 days afterwards, she held a press conference in Edmonton. And during that press conference, she had Cian Becks, who is a reporter, whether she likes him or not. She had security detain him, handcuff him, and lead him away from the protest. Her reason is that she will not be asked stonewalling questions designed to inflame like he did to the Calgary mayor. For those of you who didn't see that press conference, it was a press conference about public safety with the Premier of Alberta, Danielle Smith, and the Mayor of Calgary. And when he asked the Mayor, do you think that there is a direct correlation between your defund the police rhetoric and the increasing violence on the streets of Calgary? The Mayor did nothing. She just gave him a dirty look and walked away from the microphone. It's rather childish. I mean, that's kind of a politician's job, is to answer questions from the media. But going back to Ms. Notley, during her press conference, she was also questioned by a reporter from the Western Standard, who she did answer, and her answer is, "I won't take questions from your media organization. I don't consider it real." This is a tactic of the left. We've seen it before. Justin Trudeau did it to Rebel News. And yes, Rebel News is a very right wing news platform. But again, you are a public servant trying to get elected. You should be talking to all people. Rachel Notley just shows her ultimate hypocrisy, which is something that the left is just full of hypocrisy. They say one thing, but they do another. They claim everything they do is to help the downtrodden and the poor, but they fail to realize that higher taxes and higher spending causes cost of living increases, which disproportionately hurts those that they claim they're trying to help. It's just complete lies. The reason I say this is the most important election is that Rachel Notley will do everything she can to follow the lead of her actual leader, who is Jagmeet Singh, because there is only one NDP party from coast to coast to coast in Canada, which means that Rachel Notley's boss is Jagmeet Singh. We already know he's a champagne socialist who doesn't understand economics, doesn't understand how to run an economy, and is a borderline communist. She also just loves Justin Trudeau. That was seen from 2015 to 2019. And if Canadians actually really want to have a hope in hell of coming out of this nightmare of Trudeau, we need leaders like Danielle Smith. When I move on, I come to the next huge joke of the week. Elon Musk first labeled the CBC government-funded media, and the Liberals just lost it. And when I say Liberals, I mean anybody on the left. But I really want to ask a question. If a media organization that has a budget of $1.75 billion, who gets $540 billion of their revenue from advertising and other such things, and gets 1.2 billion of it, in other words, 69% of their funding from the government, are they not government funded media? To have a fit that it's government funded media is a joke. The CBC was created in 1933 by the federal government. It's funded to the tune of $1.2 billion a year, plus additional funding by the federal government. Its board of directors are appointed by the federal government. Now they're trying to say, oh, the governor general. But the governor general doesn't appoint anything in Canada without recommendations from the prime minister. So Justin Trudeau appoints the board. It's a joke. This week, as a defense, government House Leader Mark Holland, with support from the Justice Minister, Attorney General David Lametti, tried to point out and thought they had a gotcha moment when they said to Pierre Poilievre, well, you're 100% government funded. Even Susan Delacourt, the chief political columnist for the Toronto Star, was going on about what a great moment it was in Parliament, and Mark Holland got a standing ovation from his Liberal trained SEALs, the members of his caucus. I have a question. Who funds you, Mr. Holland? Who funds you, Mr. Lametti? Who funds every MP? Do not try to equate yourself to the CBC. The CBC is supposed to be a journalistic enterprise, both to entertain and inform Canadians with a nonpartisan, non-biased approach. A school child could watch the CBC and then watch True North and see that there is an obvious bias to the left from the CBC, just as there's an obvious bias to True North to the right. Something that's funded by every single person in Canada should be as non-biased as possible. To point out that MPs are 100% government funded is disingenuous, because all MPs, whether they be Liberal, Conservative, Bloc, NDP, or the two Little Green Party members, are all government funded. And when you sit there and go, whoa, well, you're partisan. Well, I'm sorry, that's what you're supposed to be. Mr. Holland, you are as a partisan liberal as Mr. Polyev is a conservative. Your argument is a joke, much like your government. Moving on with things from the week that I've seen, I come to the Public Service Alliance of Canada strike. The majority of our civil servants in Canada went on strike on Wednesday, 155,000 of them, and they're demanding raises that they're being disingenuous. They're adding up all of their full-time employees, plus adding in the wages of their part-time employees, some of whom work as little as 10 hours a week, and saying, oh, well, the average wage of these people is between $40,000 and $60,000. What they're not telling you is that a large number of these people actually make over $100,000 a year. And the other thing where they're being very disingenuous is that depending on who is getting the raise, some of them will be getting a raise of almost 47%. I laugh about this because when I take a look at the demands of the PSAC union, it's not just wage demands. They're also demanding that they be allowed to work from home without the scrutiny of management permanently. Yes, during the pandemic, people were sent home and worked remotely. It's 2023. Almost every other employee in this country is back to work in the office, whether they work for provincial governments, municipal governments, or private companies. They're not working from home. And even if they are doing some of their work from home, it's a hybrid model. These public servants, they don't even want a hybrid model. They want to be home 100% of the time. So if work starts at 8:30 in the morning, they can climb out of bed at 8:15, put on some pajamas, and grab a coffee and then walk to the office, which is probably just a spare bedroom. The fact of the matter is that they're being unrealistic. They're asking for wage demands that private sector employees could only dream of. They're also asking for a $17,000 per employee fund if their job is ever eliminated so they can get re-education. And they want that money put in perpetuity for all 155,000 people. They want it set aside. The odds of losing your job in the civil service through layoff is about 0.3%. Even if we take in getting fired or quitting, only 1% of people who are part of the civil service leave it. I'm one of the 1%. I left it. But to say that you get $17,000 for re-education if you get fired or laid off, that's ridiculous. They also want us to contribute to their social justice fund. I don't really know where I, as a conservative, should be supporting the social justice fund of a union that A, I'm not a member of, and B, I don't agree with a lot of the things that they consider to be social justice. It's ridiculous. What's really troubling about it is that this is hurting every single Canadian. Want to get a passport? Oh, you got a problem right now. Want to get documentation? You got a serious problem. There's no immigration going on because the people who do the immigration checks to see whether or not you can enter the country or not, they're not at work. There's going to be difficulties with pensions and with employment insurance. Not so much if you're already on it, but if you are looking to get it, you could be delayed months. And the delays for that was already impossibly long. And the government of Canada was broken before this public service strike. It'll be far more broken now. So what's our government doing about it? Well, they're treading a very thin line because Justin Trudeau knows he needs Jagmeet Singh to stay in power. Let's be honest, the NDP and their champagne socialists are going to be out there supporting them. We saw it on Wednesday. Jagmeet out there in a $2,000 Canada Goose jacket sporting his $15,000 Rolex, saying how he's out there supporting good, strong Canadian jobs, and that creating this narrative that PSAC is out there fighting not just for themselves, but for every Canadian worker. We know that's a lie. But he's also come out and said that he will not support the Liberals and will break his supply and confidence agreement if they try back to work legislation. The last 2 times we've had a public service strike, the only way to get our public service back to work is through back to work legislation. Trudeau, on the other hand, is going to be deathly afraid to do this because he knows he needs Jagmeet Singh to stay in power. When we move on, there's been a few other interesting things happen this week. We all know that, Stephen Guilbeault loves the idea of electrifying everything. Well, we've had 3 ministers really get disingenuous with stuff. The first one is Frankie Bubbles, or Philippe Francois Champagne, the industry minister, and Krista Freeland, the finance minister, and Guilbeault all praise the brand new Volkswagen battery plant that's being built in St. Thomas, and it's going to create 2,500 good, solid green jobs. They're trying to say that it was located here because Canada has the mines and the minerals to support this factory, and that's what makes the most sense. However, the real facts is that although we may have the minerals, we don't have a single mine that's pulling them out of the ground. And it could be as much as 7 years, and that's if they fast track everything to get those mines up and operational. On top of that, when we take a look at the subsidy that the federal government has paid Volkswagen to move that factory here, and we do the math, it works out to a subsidy of almost $2 million a job. Now, if these people make what the average auto worker makes, that's going to be about $85,000 a year. But for nice simple math, we'll call it 80 grand. So we're looking at 24 years. 24 years for these jobs to be in existence where they've actually paid back the money. And that's not paying back the money to the government, because we all know that there's no way that you're going to get $2 million per job back in tax revenue over the course of that 24 years. This is the whole scam of the green energy. To make it even more obvious how bad the green energy program actually is, especially trying to electrify everything, including our transportation. I did not catch the gentleman's name, but he was making a report to the United States Congress, and he was talking about how he has several friends in the transportation sector. One of his friends runs basically what in the trucking industry they call a shunt or a local haul, where his drivers move products around from major distribution centers in large urban environments. He focused on Chicago, and that his friend runs a trucking company with a 30 truck fleet. He wanted to look into electrifying it. Now, he went on to explain that these big trucks require not 1, but 2 massive batteries to make them work. Each one of these batteries weighs 8,000 pounds, so that's 16,000 pounds in batteries. And then when you put on the rest of the truck, that would be big enough to support a trailer and the rest of the mechanics that make a truck work, you'd be looking at a tractor that would weigh about 22,000 pounds, or around 1,000 kilograms. That is the equivalent of 6 passenger vehicles. And then when they took a look at what the draw would be to charge those vehicles every single night, the local utility said, don't even bother talking to us about it. Talk to the state governing body. The state governing body of Illinois said, you can't do it. You are asking to draw 5 megawatts of power every single day. That's more draw than the city that you live in. To make a long story short, to make it nice and simple for people to understand, especially the green eco warriors, your vision of everybody driving an EV can't happen because we don't have the generation or the transmission capacity to do it. And we're not going to have it for at least 50 years. In Ontario alone, without any population growth, OPG and Hydro One believe that it will take 48 years to bring the grid and to bring the generating capacity up to snuff to support an electrified transportation system, and it will cost $1.95 trillion. Trillion dollars. It can't be done. It cannot be done short term. And by the time we get there, we're going to find other sources to make cleaner cars and cleaner trucks. Which finally brings me to my last point of the week. Once again, the green activists have been at it about how we have to stop all fossil fuels now. And all they look at is oil, gasoline for cars, natural gas for heating houses, moving ships, stuff like that. They don't think about the other products that the fossil fuel industry creates. And for those of you who don't know, it creates 6,000 products. I'm going to show you a few right now. Here's one, my cell phone. Without the fossil fuel industry, electricity can charge this thing, but it can't make it. The computer that I'm sitting in front of can't be made without fossil fuels. But let's get real simple. Here we go. Deodorant. My toothbrush. My razor, which, yes, I'm not using this week. Highlighter, a pen. Hell, there's my passport. And even the cover of my passport comes from the fossil fuel industry. For those of you who think we can get rid of fossil fuels, I got some bad news for you, sunshine. It's not going to happen. It's time that we grow up and we look at things the way that we should do it. This woke attitude, which is creating victims of us all. You need to shut this off. You and I live in probably the best time to ever be alive. It is time for us to use our God-given brains and the vast knowledge that we have to innovate and create solutions to our problems. That's how you actually get out of a crisis, is you innovate ways to get out of it. You don't just sit there and say, oh, we need to stop doing this now. To do so means that you're going to doom the planet, or at least 5 billion human beings on this planet, to death. And don't think that you won't be one of them. That, as always, is Pray on This.